Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Camera. So here we are, episode 85 of Behind the Camera. And this episode's a little bit special, not only because it's a midweek bonus episode, but also because of today's guest. Today, I'm joined by DC, psychiatric doctor and host of the Full Circle podcast. DC's journey has been nothing short of incredible, moving from radio into podcasting, combining his passion for music with meaningful conversation, and funny enough, DC and I have actually shared a mutual guest in the past. So if you really enjoy this conversation, be sure to check out DC. All links to his podcast socials are in the description below. And as always, if you'd like to stay connected with Behind the Camera, all of my links are in the description as well, including the pre-order for my upcoming book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far, releasing on the 5th of March on Amazon. But now, here's the interview. DC, welcome to Behind the Camera podcast. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. How are we doing?
Thank you, Andy. It's been an absolute honor to come on. I've been a huge fan of your work. I've been wanting to do this for a very long time. So thanks for having me on.
Really appreciate that. And likewise as well. Likewise, it's actually kind of interesting how this kind of all came about. I remember scrolling through TikTok one day and seeing it was actually a mutual guest that we had around the same time last year in Frank Turner, which was incredible. And just it's such a small world how we probably interviewed him around the same week or whatever it might have been, and just how that kind of happened. So that is incredible stuff. But I'm sure we will get to that at some point over the chat. But first of all, so yeah, Full Circle. Tell us about that. How that sort of started and how it became into a podcast and where it's led you to today.
Yeah, so the Full Circle initially was a radio show at uni. So it was 2010. So I went to uni. In 2010. I studied medicine, and part of my concern was I need to get better in my communication skills. I don't know, like I was massive into like Radio 1. I loved Chris Moyles. I don't know. Are you a fan of his?
I remember. Yeah. That's like the OG Radio 1, I think, for people around our age, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I loved it, and I was like, do you know what? It sounds cool. Like maybe that's something to try and do. So I decided to I made this idea up of linking these songs, and in all honesty, it was sort of a quote unquote excuse to play music, but also just talk about stuff, and just not really music related, just like do features and just have a chat with my mates. And initially it was quite music orientated. There was like 45 minutes of music and 15 minutes of talking. So I managed to get an hour slot at uni, and people would comment, be like, "Oh, we want to hear your voice more. We want to hear you talk more." And I was like, okay. So I did, and I got friends round, and we started to do like silly things, stupid food challenges and stuff, which I wouldn't probably do as much these days. And just like student life, and just talk more about that, and just sort of that sort of stuff like that at a teenage age. And I really enjoyed it, and it was very on and off. And I left uni, brought it back on Facebook, so did it on Facebook Live for a little bit. So that was a challenge because that was on video.
Yeah.
That was new. Whereas doing on student radio was a lot easier in terms of audio. And I did it for about a year, but I was working, and I must admit that was tough. Like working and then finishing work, and then straight after doing a live video like that, and with the job, first job was when I just qualified as doctor, and that was really tough. So I sort of took a break from it after a year, and then I don't know, I missed it. I missed doing it, and then COVID happened. I was in Australia at the time. I did one show in Australia just as a test, and people enjoyed it. It was live on Facebook, and the tricky thing was on Facebook was that I'd play the songs, and I know I shouldn't do that. And you get copyright strikes and things like that. I don't. You shouldn't do things like that. So I didn't do it. But then I was like, yeah, I do want to bring it back, and I want to bring it back in a way which is doable. And I thought a podcast might work. It's annoying because you can't play songs. Like
Yeah.
it's one of those. But I think it just about works. I will say this: one person has said that they wouldn't come on the podcast because they don't play the music. So it has had its
Oh
has had its
wow.
negatives. Yeah, yeah. Like a musician who you probably know. I mean, I'll say it off the air, but you know, off the podcast. I don't want to, you know,
No,
this
that's
isn't
fair. That's fair.
stupid. But yeah. So it has had its limitations, but overall it's been great. I'm glad I brought it back as a podcast, and it's not obviously it has its pros, has its cons, but
Oh,
it's
for sure.
been incredible, and it's allowed me to meet people like you. It's allowed me to hear your stuff. Like you said, we both interviewed Frank Turner, and I love that, and I love the musicians you've interviewed and all the other guests you've interviewed, and it's just allowed me to connect with other people, and yeah, it's just something which I just never thought would happen. So yeah, an honor to do it, to be honest.
Oh, 100%. Like, I couldn't agree more. It's one of those things when you get into it, especially in podcast form, it really opens up like your world in terms of all the people who not only do this in terms of podcasting, but all the people who are willing to do it. Like, you kind of realize that there's so many people who just want to be on a podcast and are almost waiting for that kind of chance to kind of come about them without having to do it themselves. It's incredible. Like, I know a lot of people in the same sense, and like, it is, like you say, likewise, to put it back to you, it's a pleasure to honestly to meet people like yourself and like-minded, sort of similar interests, and it's just, like I say, it is really like such an eye-opening thing. So I could completely agree with everything you're saying. So how was then the transition for you from going from a radio show where you're almost kind of protected by the sort of amount you put into music versus talking, to then having to completely shift that 100% in the opposite direction, where you're talking the entire time, bar obviously back and forth with your guests?
Yeah, that is it's a shift. It definitely took some getting used to. I mean, it was easy. I think the pros of doing it on radio were that you had that break in between songs. People would message me, people would, you had live interaction, and that worked really well. Same on Facebook, people would comment and you can give shout outs,
Yeah.
and I really enjoyed that side to it. It's a little bit harder to do that on a podcast because you're recording in advance. I guess you could sort of prep before an episode, being about to record, ask some questions, or I know you've done like that. I know you've done like an Ask Me Anything and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. I guess you could, those are the sort of things you could do instead. But and so it's funny because one of my mates, when I was doing it, as with the songs, they'd say, oh, I always skip, I always like don't listen to you once the songs are on. And then someone the other day said to me, I mean, all you do is just yap now. So I can't win.
How are you supposed to win in that circumstance?
Yeah. But in short, I don't mind. I can talk ish. I think when I first started the radio show, it was easier for me to just play a song. And
Mm-hmm.
over the years, I think I got a bit more confident with that. And I think I felt ready enough to do it as a podcast. Yes, I wish I could play songs, but I think I don't know. It's quite nice. It's quite nice to just have a chat, and it's a
Yeah.
different format. It's a different format, and I didn't have as many guests on the radio show as I do now, and it's allowed me to sort of use it to platform other people and just get mates and get musicians and get other people like yourself on as well. So I think it's decent. I think it's decent. Yeah, I think it is decent. I think the only thing The only thing is, yeah, I do wish I could play the songs, I guess. In some way. I wish there was a way to be like there was a legal way to play the music.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing. But to be honest, it's not the end of the world.
Oh, of course, of course. And I think there might be a way around it, like, but I think it has to be like that underground, in terms of like the bands that you're showcasing, like bands who aren't on streaming platforms and stuff like that. I actually went on one back in like August or September, and that was like part of their thing. It was like a radio show podcast, but it was like their real conversations, but it was set in like a zombie apocalypse, and then they featured a lot of underground indie music. And but I'm curious as to how they did that, though. If I find out, I can obviously like let you know. Just
Mm.
but I 100% know what you mean. Like, and I think format changes you kind of have to do them sometimes in terms of, especially when it comes to like podcasts and stuff like that, because it is hard to sort of translate a radio show that you do live into something like you say pre-recorded. And what I find interesting is like sometimes when you do that, because I did the same sort of thing when I went from live streaming games to podcasting. You still have that kind of like same support element, but not everybody kind of follows you in terms of what you are doing. Like they will still support the fact you do it, but they just kind of won't tune in because it's not what they were used to from the very beginning. And like, of course, it's always going to be down to people's tastes, but there's still an element of it that kind of sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think that's the key point. I think your audience changes as well. I think with the radio show, I mean, yeah, I assume when you were streaming on Twitch, weren't you?
Yeah.
And that's a completely different audience to the podcasting world, I
Oh
assume.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And at UCL, the radio station was for either students or for my mates. Like when it was on Facebook, I just did it with my mates. So there was a lot more in jokes. There's a lot more personable stuff with my friends. Whereas in a podcast, you could do it for your mates. You could, and there's no issue with that. But I guess if you're going to be if you're going to be interviewing guests and you're going to be interviewing other people, I guess that's not going to be the case. And I guess there's going to be different people interested in that. Yeah. And what's happened, I think, for me, is that friends who may have been interested in the past have become less so. But what it's meant is that other people who may never have been interested in the past have become more so. So it's about getting that balance right. It's tough.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. And it's interesting because like something that I was thinking about quite recently was whenever, and it's probably be very similar to yourself as well. It's like when you live stream something like that, exactly who your audience is. Every single person who's watching you, whether it's like familiar names or just rough kind of numbers. But when you go to a podcast, you don't, you see your metrics, but you don't, that's the one thing that you don't see is who is watching. You see the locations, you see down to like the city that they live in, but you don't see who is watching you. And it's kind of just like, when you go from that sort of thing, having a core audience who even personally, to be like, okay, who is actually tuning in this time? And that was something that I particularly kind of struggled. It's like a mindset I kind of struggled to get out of after when I started this and when the sort of thing started picking up. I was kind of like, these numbers are coming in, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you get people reaching out to you, for example, like, and I mean, a lot of people when they reach out, it's like they always pitch it by, oh, I checked out your latest episode, and they'll give you 3 bullet points. And it's just like, they've got to do it for the pitch, but at the same time, you're kind of like, that's nice. You checked it out. Thank you. I mean, I love that.
I've had that I mean, to be fair, the person that said no to come in on the podcast, they listened. In fairness to them, fair play. They were like, yeah, I listened, but you just don't play songs, so I don't want to come on. So I guess that is a good thing that they checked it out.
Oh yeah. Like, because I think as well, it is one of those things where when you reach out to somebody, then I think your name's always going to be at the back of their mind. Like, and then if it kind of if you kind of happen to cross paths again, like you come up on their algorithm, then they're going to recognize you. So like, I think there is that kind of like powerful little sort of thing about it where even if you don't really get that traction, consistency is what kind of gets you to different places. And and obviously with yourself, you went from sort of a radio station solo to sort of interviewing mates, and you've interviewed a lot of amazing people as well. And how did you kind of find that sort of transition, sort of going from like a sort of solo show to interviewing people?
Yeah, it was definitely it took some getting used to. There's no denying it. Frank Turner, which we spoke about, was the first musician I interviewed, which and this is no disrespect to any of the other musicians I've had since, but I would still say he's probably been the biggest musician I've had so far, probably. And I was nervous. I was absolutely bricking it. I don't know how you felt. How did you feel when you had him.
I was the same. I was the same, but like he wasn't the first famous person as such that I'd interviewed. Like I'd interviewed a musician called Grant Kirkhope before, and he was like famous for Donkey Kong 64, Banjo Kazooie, a lot of Nintendo 64 games, big composer. But the type of person where his work is more known than him as a person, but I kind of treated it with that sort of same esteem, I suppose. And there was the nerves were there for sure, but it's one of those things. I mean, you know yourself. Once you get into the swing of it, you're kind of like, oh, it's just another person. He's just a person like me, you know.
Yeah. And I was initially starstruck, like there's no denying it.
Oh,
Like it was, and I don't know, it was very much like I was just a bit worried about how to approach this, and you know what I said was just being silly or not. And in fairness, I just stuck it to my style. That was the thing. I wanted to stick it to my style. I wanted to do my boom 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 shatter, which I always did. I wanted to do my would you rather stuff. I wanted to do those quizzes. I wanted to do those things and just keep it like I did with full circle format. I didn't want to change it. As I mean, obviously you do a little bit, but I wanted to keep it like that because that otherwise it didn't, and it just didn't feel right for me. And in fairness to him, he took part, he did well, and I say he did well, of course he did well. But what I mean is, you know, he was great, and his full circle songs were great, and I love that he played along. And yeah, it gave me a lot of confidence. Afterwards, I felt like really like on a high. It sounds ridiculous to say that, but
oh no, but I 100% get what you mean. You know, it's there's like, it's like an adrenaline thing, isn't it? When you
yeah,
get to speaking with people like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it wanted me to interview more musicians.
Mm.
It wanted me to speak to more. It wanted me to reach out more because I reached out to a few just on the off chance just to see because I wasn't sure if that is really what I wanted to do. But when I did speak to Frank Turner, I then reached out to more people, and you know, you've said it as well. I've heard, you know, you probably get more no's than yes. There's no denying it. But the ones that you get the yeses are the, you cherish it, you savor it, and it's great. And yeah, I haven't looked back since. And I think I still do solo shows, and I still interview mates, and I still want to keep format a little bit like that because I don't want my show to just be an interview show. That's just how I want to keep my show. Which I don't know. Obviously, I think it's probably with guests. You know, there's probably more interest and there's probably more more chat that can be had. But I also want to make my songs. I also want to make a full circle. I also want to
Mm.
showcase my stuff. I also want to do those features like my mate Abid giving his words of wisdom, stupid things like that. I still want those things to happen, which I can't do with guests. So every so often, I still want to keep it a solo show. Or if I don't know if we say this, or if a guest cancels and then you have to do a solo show, one or the other.
Oh, I've had that, yeah, yeah. But I think that's the strong thing about the format you have because obviously you have your structure and like it's a segmented show. And if you have a guest, you can kind of still keep to that, and you can kind of filter in like interview style, and of course, then because you're so used to doing sort of solo work as well, if you do have that kind of last minute cancellation, you're stuck. Then, well, you're not stuck, I suppose, because it's nothing like it's nothing you've not done before. You've done the solo things. You can make it work. You can kind of feature things that you might just have in your back pocket that you were saving for another episode.
Yeah, no, it's very true. It is. It does. It does upset me when people do cancel though, especially if it's last minute, which has happened. Like, no, it's not an issue. We all have lives. Like, it's not an issue. But obviously, just personally, it does feel a bit of a shame. But you can't take it personally. You can't take things personally.
No, no,
Um,
100%. I think that's like, especially whenever you're sort of sort of new into the sort of getting people on and guests and all that aren't like people or your friends. It's business to a lot of people.
yeah,
Because like obviously, you and I, we both have our day jobs and we do this on the side. And then you have people who they will have days dedicated to just doing podcasts. And sometimes it's their job, sometimes they're on like a media cycle. And things don't work out. So you kind of think that maybe it's like a sort of missed opportunity, but at the same time, it's like sometimes like you get something better kind of come out of it, whether it be from a metric standpoint or anything else. Like I had something similar happen recently. I had somebody cancel on me. I think no, God, that was like the week from hell. I think I had like 4 cancellations,
Oh,
and like I was supposed to have that. That was like 4 weeks worth. And I had 4 like
no.
cancellations and reschedules, and I was like left with no episode for a week. And I was like, all right, I'll just talk into the microphone for half an hour and see what happens. And it turned out to perform actually quite well. And you kind of find that even if you're just sitting talking, and you know yourself, I don't really have a sort of structure with what I do. It's just talking back and forward informally, and like that sort of works. For me, I would love to do segmented stuff. I would love to do that, but doesn't fit what I do, and I feel like I couldn't. I feel like
Yeah.
it takes like a really kind of good level of creativity to be able to do that.
No, thank you. I mean, I think there's again, there's pros and cons to it, because the tricky thing with segmented stuff is you've got to try and fit it in.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is another thing I've learned. So I had another guest on the show, and it was like 2 hours long, and
Oh, wow.
like that's great. That's great. I love the fact that we had such a chat. But like, and you know this, like if the show goes on for a bit too long, the work to do afterwards is just tough. It's just how it is. But I would always be like, right, I've got to have this feature because I've made this feature for them. I've got to have it. And I think over time I've started to realize, no, I can just leave that one. I can just skip this one out. We can just chat a bit. And if we don't do that feature, that's fine. We just do it another time. That's something I've learned. And it sounds so simple. But I think before I was like, no, I've got to do everything because that's my show. So, I realized, no, like if people just want to have an informal chat and then we link the songs, that's fine.
Yeah.
So sometimes I felt like I've tried to cram too much in a show because I want to add the segments, whereas sometimes just got to let the conversations flow a bit. And that's something I've learned as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think it is one of those things when people start out going into a podcast, because I think it's like, to go back to the radio show, you're kind of sort of protected by your kind of time frames in terms of, exactly what's going on and when, and you can time it down to the second. With a podcast, especially with a guest, if you're trying to kind of keep to that same time scale, 45 minutes to an hour, maybe an hour 15 at a push, you kind of want to sort of you kind of want to segment it live as you're recording it, because then that way I kind of think it makes everything a lot easier in post, because who has time to sort of sit and edit all day? You know what I mean? Like, when we've got jobs and stuff, we can't do that. Like, but and like, so with the sort of segmented nature, then do you kind of like, whenever you pitch it to a guest, do you sort of let them know that it's segmented, that you have this in it, or do you pitch it as like kind of, it's just, it is just going to be like a interview kind of thing?
No, I do pitch it as if it's going to have segments. I tell them that there'll be would you rather, there'll be fun. I say there'll be fun features like would you rather and a quiz tailored to the guest. That's usually what I say, because I usually do a quiz tailored to a guest, not always. And to be fair, they don't really during the interview or just before we speak, they don't really remember. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, we just sort of have a chat. Yeah, we just have a chat. I think, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's I mean, I guess I honestly don't know what they prefer. I mean, some don't. I'm sure some don't. Some just probably just want a free flowing chat and not anything like that. And I think, to be honest, the segments, so like the would you rather questions, for instance, I do tailor it to them, and it does lead to a bit of a chat. It leads to a bit of a thing about them, and maybe something they wouldn't maybe say otherwise, if that makes sense. That's
Yeah.
sort of what I'm thinking in my head. I'm sort of thinking, why, like the reason why I do it like that is because I want them to sort of say things. Obviously they do a lot of interviews, they do a lot of media, they do a lot of PR, and they probably say a lot of the same things, which is great. But I guess I don't want to be. I don't want to be talking about those sorts of things all the time. Like, if it was me, and I guess that's what I'm always thinking. I'm like, I just want to just make it a bit different, and that's sort of why I do it, and why I want to pitch it to them like that as well.
No, of course, and I think it's definitely like the best way to do it, because sometimes it could be what they want to hear. Like, you say sometimes people want to just like have a sort of normal interview because it fits into their press cycle, but some might just want to have a bit of fun with it and just because I do think that whenever they are in like that kind of interview cycle, people are fully expecting to hear the same questions again and again and again, whether they word it differently or whatever it may be. Like I know for a fact whenever I interviewed Frank Turner, like I know that most of the questions I asked him, he probably had been asked all in that same day. And do you know what? It's fine. When you do have that kind of just flat interview kind of thing, it can be difficult, and you know obviously you have the sort of things you want to talk about, but at the same time you want the conversation to naturally flow, to just be like, well, okay, this is sort of, I like where this is going, I might have to kind of sacrifice this talking point or this segment, and
Yeah.
you do have to do things on the fly. And do you find that when you have to do that, sometimes you kind of might have a better episode out of doing it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it definitely creates spontaneity, and I think it definitely creates moments which will, you use TikTok, you use Instagram, which definitely creates more of those moments that you can
Mm-hmm.
share. And I think that definitely helps. I think that, yeah, I think by being able to sort of pivot, being able to sort of not be like, right, it's got to go this way. I think yes, because it's very natural, it's very flowing. I think for the listener, it will sound better.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Because something that I used to do whenever I first started this, and whenever I started it, I did it live on Twitch, and but I had like all of my questions always written out word for word how I was gonna, and like the delivery of it was sort of, I think, no, knowing that if you were to go back and listen, you would know I was reading off a page, but I kind of made it look away. It sounded natural, but then the problem with that is you kind of throw active listening into the mix, and then you find yourself with a 2.5 hour episode, which
Mm,
is like fine, but I, it comes down to the listeners, doesn't it, and the attention spans of
yeah,
the listeners. And if I think it's a good thing about like YouTube, for example, where you can, it will break down the episode for you, and you can kind of
yeah.
look, and it sort of gives like a sort of general synopsis of what they're talking about for a select period of time. But yeah, like it's such a big learning curve, isn't it, in terms of just sort of having to like sacrifice a little bits for the sake of what is going on and for that kind of natural fluidity of the conversation.
Oh, 100%. It really is. And I think it's you've got to feel comfortable with it as well. Like some people may need, might need to write some questions down, because I guess it takes a bit of practice as well. Like the
Mm-hmm.
first time I spoke to Frank Turner, like Frank Turner, as I mentioned, he like I that was because that was all new to me. I was a little bit nervous, and I think there were times when maybe he said something and maybe I could have followed through with that, but because I was also, you know, didn't want to, he had a time, and I didn't want to talk too much, and etc. Sometimes I would just brush on and move on, which to some would be like, why'd you do that? Like, why didn't you expand?
Mm-hmm.
But because in my head I already knew that I needed to sort of link to the next song or do a feature, and I don't know, like that was just how it was. And I think I've heard some podcasts too, because I love hearing music podcasts and love hearing musicians, and I've heard some podcasts where, like you said, they will have like specific questions, and that, like you say, it's great. But if you're, yeah, so I think sometimes that they might not even be listening to the answers, and
Yeah.
then they go straight on to the next question, and you're like, well, what, like, why have you done, like, I don't know, you don't want to sound, you don't want to come across a bit harsh, but you are also like, as a listener, you just got to bear that in mind as well. You just got to acknowledge that, yeah, it's gonna have like its ups and downs. Yeah, you're asking this question because you want to get this information, but actually it's probably just easier to just let them speak. Like musicians, anyone will want to speak. Give them a platform, they will say whatever.
Oh God, 100%. Yeah, 100%. And I kind of think that's the sort of, as an interviewer, it's one of like the sort of it's like a golden ticket in a way, because there's basically you have to say less. You get to say less. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, and of course, with when it comes to sort of stories and tangents, of course, then that's where the kind of conversational element comes into it. But if you're asking somebody direct questions about themselves and their life, and they are gonna, especially musicians are storytellers, and they are gonna want to tell their story in the way that it was meant to be told, in the way that the average listener might not really have perceived in terms of like their songs and stuff. And it's just, sometimes you just kind of sit and like get to sit back and are just so like immersed in what they're saying.
Yeah. It happens. There'll be some musicians. So a couple of musicians. So Jamie Lemon, he's great. I mean, he's good friends with Frank Turner as well. He if he hears this, I mean, I'm sure if he heard this, he wouldn't mind me saying this. He could speak. He could talk. And that show was almost 2 hours. And every time he'd apologize, he'd be like, gosh, I'm talking too much. I'm talking too much. I'm sorry. And I would say to him, no, this is great.
Yeah.
Just talk. It's fine. I mean, obviously, like when I was editing it and it was, at 1 hour, 1.5 hours, and there was still like half an hour left to edit, I was like, oh my goodness, okay, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But no, at the time, I just loved hearing it. And yeah, they're great storytellers and I love it. It's happened the other way though. There was a musician, and I must admit, because it was a day when I was recording with 2 musicians. One musician who, again, spoke a lot, great, loved it, but it was quite a long time. And then I had another recording in the afternoon, and it was like the complete opposite. But because I had such a long one in the morning, I quite actually enjoyed it. Like, I know it sounds ridiculous to say, but I quite enjoyed. Oh yeah, they're really just sticking to it, and I could just move on. So I don't know. I don't mind. I mean, you must have. I'm sure you've had that with guests as well, where some probably have spoken a lot, and some maybe it's taken a little bit of nudging.
Oh God, yeah. Like there are so many people where you are not, obviously whenever you want to kind of stick to a sort of minimum and maximum time, I kind of think when you're doing this, and there you get to like sort of maybe halfway through your list of things to want to talk about, and it's been like 7 minutes, and you're like, oh my God, how can I draw out more? What I need to find this one thing that's going to make them just light up and be like, oh yeah, I could talk about that for hours. But again, like the thing about that is, it's like some people they just will answer the question for what it is. They don't really, not that they see a need to go into it, but so some people don't, and it doesn't make them any, less of like a talker or anything like that. It's nothing to sort of pertains to their ability. But yeah, like when yourself, when you're interviewing someone, you kind of, there's only so much you can do to sort of drive a story out of somebody without sort of having to say, expand on that. Because as soon as you sort of do that, it becomes like far too formal, and then I kind of think you'll lose them at that point.
Yeah, it's, you want to get that balance. You got to get that balance right, and it's easier said than done though. It's easier said than done.
100%. Yeah, like, because I mean, with every sort of like guest you have, you have to kind of gauge the episode around the guest. I think you sort of, within the first 5 minutes of a recording, I think that's kind of the easiest way to do it. And it's not a case where it's like you're thinking, oh God, this person's going to be difficult or this is going to be easy, but it's really a rapport thing in the things they're saying. Like, you can kind of tell by somebody's temperament, and a lot of the things that they say, you kind of like will pick out certain things, being like, oh that sounds interesting, I'm going to keep this and we'll develop on this after. And sometimes you don't get around to it, and it's I think that's the beauty of like having doing interviews, is because every single guest is going to be different. And like, I mean, some, like we say, you might have your work cut out for you, and others it's going to just be great, 40 minutes and we're done here.
Yeah, makes the editing easier, right?
Oh man, 100%. So like after you interviewed Frank Turner, and this was in the first like 2 months of you being like a podcast, like a published podcast on Spotify, right? So that's incredible as it is. But you've gone on to sort of interview a lot more musicians. So you got like Dan from Barry Tomorrow, Julian Kay as well, and on many others. So do you feel once you got the sort of Frank Turner interview done, did this kind of give you that kind of confidence, be like, I could reach out to any musician here, and also what sort of basis did you sort of like choose who you reached out to and ultimately got on the podcast?
So Frank Turner, it definitely gave me the confidence to reach out to a lot more people. I reached to probably about, I mean, Julian K, Ryan Shuck was someone I actually reached out quite early on as well, because I've been a massive fan of them. I they're not a relatively big band. They might have been known in the past for Orgy. People might have heard of them. So they did a cover of Blue Monday, but Julian K, I got into them because Linkin Park singer Chester Bennington was the producer of their first album, and also they did a band together called Dead by Sunrise.
Yes.
So I absolutely loved their stuff, and I really wanted him on. And he was actually the first person to say yes, but that just because of logistics, because of my timing, his timing, we weren't able to get that sorted till later on. I am selective. I don't want to be interviewing musicians for the sake of it. I think I have to have some connection to them. So Dan Winterbates from Bury Tomorrow, I absolutely love Bury Tomorrow. They're a great band, and I love Dan for his work for the NHS, and also as a musician. And I think and he's so inclusive. He talks about mental health so extensively with his own mental health experiences. I think he's an absolute great person, and it was an absolute honor for him to say yes and have him on. That was again another one that was a bit nerve-wracking, because again, new to podcasting. I just got Zencast. I just started doing video podcasting as well, like all that sort of stuff. And we started recording, and the microphone, there's a little microphone thing at the bottom which tells you if it's moving or not, and it wasn't moving. So for the whole hour, and I was like, I can't say to Dan, I can't say to the lead singer Bury Tomorrow, oh, I think we might not be recording. Like, I couldn't say that to him. So I got really nervous, worried for that whole hour. And all I wanted to do afterwards was just end it so I could just check if it worked.
Yeah.
I know it sounds ridiculous to say that, but and I think at the end, I think I was just like, oh, so it's been really good talking to you, but I've got to go, and I felt really bad, and it was just one of those. And thankfully, it was all okay. But yeah, I feel really bad about that. I felt really bad that I just had to be like, right, I've got to go by, especially like that. It was just nerves. And I think I messaged him since and apologized and stuff. It's fine. It's just one of those. But in short, sorry, that was a bit of it. That wasn't really
No. Again, like what we said before, this is what it's all about,
Yeah. In short, it's given me the confidence to speak to more musicians. I am selective with my musicians. I've reached out to maybe bigger musicians than I would have at the start.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been mostly no's, but but it is what it is. And actually, that's not an issue. Like, actually, that just gives me the motivation, if I'm able to be like, hey, maybe this time next year, let's see if we can get you on.
100%. And like, because the way I look at it is that if you get like rejected, it's they're never a sort of like, there was like a really kind rejection. It's never just a no. It's always just on this occasion kind of thing. So it's like at some point in the future, we could. Now, whether that's a let them down easy kind of approach, I don't know. But if you circle back a year, in a year's time, I mean, like circumstances might have changed. Plus then as well, like, I mean, they might not even remember the original outreach,
Yeah.
So then based on that then, right, because the thing I like about it is that, and this kind of is the same with myself as well, is that if you have like a sort of big guest on, it doesn't define what it is that we do as podcasters. Like, it's that we still have our show, we'll still have people to come on and still have a topic to talk about, which is like one of the best parts about it. But that being said, who would your dream musician be to get onto the full circle?
Oh man. It's good. It's either. So I think if I think the first name that comes to my mind is Mike Shinoda of Linkin Park.
Mm-hmm.
I just I love him. I just think he is incredible. He is so talented. I think I maybe people do know, but I think he's not underestimated. But I don't think people realize exactly how he is Linkin Park. He's the one that writes the music, writes pretty much the lyrics, the instruments. He you know, obviously the band does it, but he's the main writer, and he is so talented. I love his solo stuff. Fort Minor as well. He is just great, and I would love to speak to him. The odds of that happening 0.00001%, but you never know. It might go to 0.0001% next year.
That's it.
Uh,
Yeah.
other names, another name would be someone like Flea from like Red Hot Chili Peppers. I'd love to speak to him. He's an incredible bassist. There's a debate about is he the best bassist of all time. I mean, he's up there for sure. He's definitely in that category, but I think he would definitely be up there as well, for sure.
Yeah. They're honestly two incredible names as well. Like, you know, I like the Mike Shinoda edition particularly because like everything you said there is one of those things that was, and it was a shame how really kind of it got people to the circumstances in what got people to do their research into Linkin Park, and that was with Emily Armstrong being announced as the new singer of the band, and people were like, oh no, Chester wouldn't have any of this, and it took for people to be like, well, Mike is Linkin Park. Mike is the sort of, you know, everything that's gone into it prior. Obviously, Chester was just sort of an iconic part of it, but everything was like Mike was the brainchild of it, you know. And it's kind of a shame that there was that negative backlash that kind of that's what took people to sort of actually kind of do their homework on it. But 100% agree. He would be incredible. Like he would be just because you see like his interviews that he does when they're on cycles, and it's like he seems so just like humble and down to earth, and it's like man of few words, but you know he's got some stories. You know he's got some stories for sure.
Definitely.
And Flea as well. Like I mean, like just for being in Red Hot Chili Peppers alone and their history, he would also have some stories.
Yeah, he's done some things over the years.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
So obviously linking into this is something that we mentioned before, especially with Down from Barry Tomorrow and the mental health side of things. So you are a psychiatry doctor, but you like to also link part of that into your podcast as well, which I think is like a very, very important thing to do. So what was the sort of inspiration behind getting into that kind of sort of aspect of health first?
Yeah, so when I was at med school, so I went to med school in London, UCL, and there was a lot of specialties that just were very fascinating, but just maybe not to my interest. And when I did my psychiatry placement, and it's almost a full circle moment because I now work in the same place I did my psychiatry placement as a med student, and the team there were just incredible. They were so accommodating to the students. It just made me feel so welcome. And it was interesting. Well, for me, I found it really interesting. I think psychiatry and mental health for medical students can be divisive because it isn't probably as well taught because maybe physical health is a lot more the focus, and that's completely understandable. But mental health, I think, is becoming more and more taught, and someone that now actually teaches medical students at UCL, that's definitely becoming more at the forefront about mental health and mental health experiences. So yeah, I had a great time there. And then when I did my next placement, when I went back to I think it was like back on a ward, I was like, oh, I miss psychiatry. And yeah, since then I hadn't really looked back. So in your first when you qualify, you've got to do 2 years of working in just general jobs, quote unquote. So I didn't do a psychiatry job in those 2 years because I knew that I wanted to do it. So I did a lot of like physical health jobs. So I worked in A&E, worked in GP, worked in all those sorts of settings. No, just to make sure that my physical health knowledge was still on top, because you do sort of de-skill, quote unquote, when you're working in psychiatry, because you're focusing a lot more on psychiatry rather than physical health. So got into psychiatry. So I've been a psychiatrist. I've been in psychiatry now since 2018. And to be honest, I wasn't sure whether to say I'm a doctor, to say whether I'm a psychiatrist. I didn't know whether to do that on the podcast. I was really in two minds, and I was like, do you know what? But I am.
Yeah.
That is my job. So actually, I should just say it, because that was something which I never did on radio. I never did on Facebook. I never mentioned I was a medical student or a doctor. I never mentioned that during those times. But I thought, no, actually, I want to talk about it. It's not at the forefront. It's
Yeah.
still not at the forefront as maybe, the music chat or the features, but it's there for guests and for musicians to talk about, because, I had Geordie from Tonic Music, a mental health charity that supports musicians for their mental health. And I mean, it's mental health is prevalent amongst all, but
100%.
in musicians, I think it is even higher. I think it's unfortunately one of those industries where it's difficult to earn money, difficult to function, and a lot of people will go on drugs and those sorts of things, and that can have an impact on your mental health. And I think for me, it's important to allow musicians to talk about it, but I've also had musicians who have said, no, I don't want to talk about it. And I think that's completely fair as well. I think that's absolutely fair. So I keep it pretty loose on on the Full Circle. I don't want it to be a mental health podcast per se, because it isn't. I would say it's a music podcast hosted by a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, of course, yeah. And like, whenever you kind of like made that sort of decision initially, like, was it a case of like you didn't want to kind of get typecast in the wrong way? Is it becoming like a sort of people like seeing, oh no, this is going to be like a not a music podcast, but people like looking for music podcasts think, oh no, it's going to be about something else, kind of thing?
Yeah, partly. And I think it's just like this, it's my job, being a psychiatrist, I love it, but it's not something which I see this as more of a hobby. I see this as more of a, something I want to do. And I love seeing patients and treating patients, and, talking about psychiatry to colleagues and teaching it to students and all that sort of stuff. I really love that, but I don't think I could do that all the time, and I think that's why I wanted to just sort of make sure that it's seen as a music podcast, but with a mental health nuance to it, if that makes sense. And I mean, it doesn't mean that if you're interested in mental health, maybe this podcast is still interesting, because it's still hosted by someone that is. But I don't think the primary focus isn't about mental health, but there is sprinkles of it here and there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, even if it's not like sort of at the forefront of the theme of the podcast, it's definitely something important to have as like a platform for people to talk about, should they want to, or if they don't want to, that's also fine. I think that it's, and like, especially with, like you say, like the music industry, that's the sort of part that you don't see of it, and especially in this day and age, because the whole party rock and roll lifestyle of musicians is kind of, to a degree, died out with a lot of newer musicians and bands and stuff like that. They are literally kind of, they'll do their gig, they'll get on the bus to the next venue, and that's kind of, and they're just doing what they're doing. Like, they're kind of just living normal lives. But I think that there's an element of that where they are more aware and mindful as to what it is that they are kind of leaving behind. Like, they're leaving behind their families, they're leaving behind so much more, because they're away pursuing their dream. And I think that, I can't really speak from sort of experience, because like I'm not a traveling musician, but like to me, it seems as though like that kind of, there may seem like there's an element of guilt for what they're doing, because like they're doing it for themselves, even though they are providing for other people, but they're the ones who are away chasing their dreams at the sort of expense and for the value of the people who are leaving at home. I mean, obviously it's speculative, but it's kind of something that comes to mind for sure.
Yeah. And that's got to be one part to it. There's a whole array of reasons why it can really have an impact on their mental health. I think, like you say, just traveling, just touring, being away is going to play a part. The the diet, your diet's probably gonna be
Oh
impacted as a
God,
result.
yeah.
You're playing till like, what's the curfew? Most gigs like 11 o'clock, and you're
Mhm.
probably then having to wind down. That's gonna take hours, and then your sleep's probably impacted. And we all know the impact of sleep and mental health. You're probably exercising less because you're not sleeping enough. Although on the stage you're probably getting a workout, so that's fair enough. But I think, and then yeah, like you said, being away from family and like you say, pursuing your dreams, is there a bit of a selfish element to that? But at the same time, you might be missing your family,
Yeah.
doing that, and that's going to have a detriment impact to you as well. So I think sometimes, I think we all think it as well. Sometimes, if people, when bands are on tour, sometimes you think, oh my goodness, it sounds so great. You're just traveling with your mates, going from one city to another, exploring everywhere, and performing to like your songs to everyone, and getting all these adulations and cheers. But I think it's not as straightforward as that. I think you forget about the other parts and forget about like missing family, being away from them, and downtime. Because for every up, you do need a bit of downtime as well. You
Oh
need
yeah.
to sort of balance. It's a work-life balance. That's what it is. And I think for musicians, there's a lot of work, and I'm not sure what the life is like. If you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
absolutely. Like there's only kind of so much that, we as like the sort of listeners and like the concert goers, for example, would see. And that's like what they put on Instagram to sort of be like, oh yeah, we're in this town, last minute tickets, or, oh, you see them on stage, but you don't know if they haven't just not left their bus all day because they're just like, nah, I just want to like, they've got a full day ahead of them, and then work doesn't start until 9 o'clock at night for them, kind of thing, and
Yeah.
it's as something else. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's like, as a music fan, I think it's a sort of life that, myself and so many other people would have wanted at one point, but like you see what it's really like at times, especially with more people taking hiatuses off bands because of burnout. You never would have heard of that before, but like burnout is like, I think I've seen so many people either leaving bands or taking hiatuses or off or not joining tours because it's like they're far too burnt out. And
Yeah.
I think there's the whole aspect of rising ticket costs. You're paying so much money to go to a concert. There's a level of expectation there, and I think that must only add on to the stress of a musician if they can't be 100%.
Yeah.
The fans are going to notice 100%.
For sure. And I just want to add to what you're saying about burnout, because I don't know if I sometimes get these clips of Diary of a CEO. You must know that
Oh yeah, I've
podcast.
heard of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen a few
Yeah.
clips of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was this person that said burnout, it doesn't exist. Burnout's not real.
Mm.
And I must admit, not many things like that annoy me. It's just, obviously trying to cause provocation. And I was just like, this is just misinformation.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Burnout is a genuine thing. It's a real thing, and it can happen to any of us. It's when we're too stressed. It's when stress has been chronic, has been long-standing, and unfortunately something, or just whether, something just tips us over the edge. And it could be a combination of things. It could be one acute thing, and unfortunately that leads to burnout. And it does exist, and I want to make that very clear, because what you said there can happen to any of us. And unfortunately for musicians, it can they just have a higher chance of it, because there's a lot more stresses there, like we've spoken about, that can just add up, and it can just lead to burnout.
100%. Like, and it is mental health just in general is like a very important conversation to have, whether it be on a podcast or just even with a friend, even just with
Yeah.
somebody who will listen, and that's sometimes all you need is just somebody to listen. You not necessarily need someone to solve your problems, but getting it out there, that's half the struggle.
Yeah. And you've spoken to Calm.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, I
yeah,
did. I did. God, that was November
yeah.
2024. Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. They do like a campaign every year for streamers called Jingle Jam, and you basically raise money, and there's like an incentive for viewers where I think for the year I did it, if you donated £35, you got like a plethora of like Steam keys for different games. I think there was maybe about 20 games or something like that.
Mm.
It was like worth more than £35, but like
Wow.
it was, yeah, and there was all sorts of, so, and I was just kind of thinking, new into the podcasting game, I was just thinking, here, this could be good, this could be kind of, good. And yeah, like, I mean, they were fantastic charity. They do like, so like they're very, very clued into contemporary society in terms of the fact that like they can link mental health to just about anything, and how there are so many benefits of it. Fantastic charity. Would love to work with them again, genuinely.
No, fair. Yeah, no, they're really good. I mean, it's one of those things where it's a shame these charities have to exist, if you know what I mean. But it's great that we've got them. It's great that we've got Crisis, Samaritans, It's Mind. They're all excellent charities, and without them, there'd be so much more devastation. It's just a shame as someone from from a mental health background and psychiatrist, that the funding isn't there for NHS to do this, to sort of be able to tackle this, or a lot of the other things, social situations like housing and welfare, all those sorts of things, which probably beyond the scope of this. But what I mean is that it's just it's just a bit of a shame that charities have to do this, but without them, it's a necessity.
100%. Like it is so true. And like I think in that sort of aspect, like the charity side of things, it adds a more personal element into it. I think kind of there's always going to be, you're always going to sort of be able to like read more into a charity about like people's stories, and there's always going to be that kind of local community aspect of it. And then especially with like CAM, for example, they go across the entire UK, and they've worked with Frank Turner as well, or Frank Turner's worked with them, I should say. And I think it's good to kind of have that level of influence, where there's like a relatable figure, who, again, another person very open about mental health in the past. And it's like I think on all platforms and all sort of walks of life, it's something that affects everybody. And it's something that, even though the conversation is still quite prevalent now, it's still not talked about enough.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that I think the one thing I would say is that if you're noticing warning signs about your mental health, so if you're noticing that you're feeling low on a particular day, if you're noticing that your sleep's just not going as well as maybe you'd like, if you're being a bit more annoyed about things, if things just don't feel right, just act on it straight away. As if you can, just focus it, speak to someone, just be like, hey, have I been acting a bit differently? Like, and because I think I just don't feel right. Just act on it straight away, because it's actually the early intervention that really can help in the longer run, and also in the short term, but in the longer run as well. It's just acting fast. But I think, unfortunately, it's getting better. I think more people are speaking out, and I think more people are recognizing it. But I think you're right, there's still more work to be done, especially in recognizing our own, what is it that can affect our own mental health experiences. Because for one person, just because that worked for them, so someone might say to you, yeah, I took this medication and that worked really well for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you taking that medication will work for you. Maybe for you, what's important is talking to someone about it, like a psychologist, or exercising. Then it depends on your strengths and your goals, and what works best for you. It's not a one size fits all, which is tricky in mental health. It's really tricky in mental health. But if I have one advice for people that may be thinking they have mental health experiences or struggles, is to just pick it out early, ask someone that you trust about it, reach out, whoever it is, whether it's GP, if you trust them, whether it's a friend, whether it's a charity, Samaritans, or even texting. There's like text services now, like Shout. So you can just text Shout to a number, and you can just message people. I know a lot of people struggle with talking. There's a lot of support out there, and I know it's easier said than done. It really is easier said than done to just say this, because it's hard. It's hard. You don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to do these things when you're feeling like that. But if you even just baby steps, even just getting your phone and just texting Shout, or just giving a message to someone you trust, just saying, I don't feel well. Just it can do wonders.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic advice from obviously a qualified expert as well. So that definitely goes a long, long way, and so like for everybody listening today, if you are feeling in a certain way, take that advice on board. And like, DC said, it's not a one size fits all, but sometimes you kind of have to just find what works for you. And, but it's a journey. We all got there in the end. But DC, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Camera podcast. Thank you so much for your time. I had an amazing chat. But just before we wrap up, where can the audience find you and the Full Circle?
Oh, thank you so much. No, it's been an absolute honor to come on your podcast. You've had so many amazing guests, and it's been an honor to just be a guest on this. No, to find me, you can go on Instagram, Full Circle Podcast DC. That's where I mostly hang out. Also on TikTok, but Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, all those sorts of places. Full Circle DC, Full Circle Podcast DC. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute honor.
No, my absolute pleasure, DC. Appreciate your time once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
And there you have it for episode 85 of Behind the Camera. A huge thank you to DC for joining me this week. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to check out his show and give him a follow. All links are in the description below. And as always, if you'd like to stay connected with Behind the Camera, you can find all of my links there too, including socials, merch, and the pre-order for my upcoming book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far, releasing on the 5th of March. Thank you for listening, for the support, and for being part of the journey. Until next time, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.